So again, good afternoon to everyone and welcome to the 7th edition now of the Eurosif Sustainable Finance Update. We'd like to thank everyone for taking the time today. We realize that it's a very, very busy period at the moment as we draw closer to Christmas and hopefully a nice break for everyone. We've got, quite a lot to cover in today's session. There's been quite a large number of developments concerning core pieces of sustainable finance legislation in the past few weeks. So if we just take a quick look at our agenda, we're going to provide you today with an update on just a moment here, the state of play of the EU taxonomy, particularly the politics around the Complementary Delegated Act. That will be followed then by an update on the further delay to the application of the technical standards specifying disclosure requirements under SFDR. Then we'll provide you with an update on the progress of the proposal for an EU Green Bond standard. And finally, we'll touch upon the recently published Capital Markets Union package and maybe discuss how it may contribute to sustainable finance. So, of course, as always, throughout the update, we'd welcome any questions that you might have. We'd ask you to use the dedicated Q&A function, and we'll do our best to respond. There should be some time at the end of the session for a Q&A. So if we need to proceed with some of the updates and have to leave your question unanswered, we'll revert back toward the end of the session. And of course, finally, as always, the slides will be made available after the session today, as well as a recording. So with all of that sort of said, let's kick off and start with the EU taxonomy. So of course, we understand at this point that the Complementary Delegated Act, or DA, that will include natural gas and nuclear energy in the EU taxonomy is due to be published at least, and possibly even fully adopted by the European Commission in mid-December, possibly as early as the 9th of December, which is next Thursday. Now, at present, we can only speculate as to the conditions that will be attached to the use of natural gas and nuclear energy in order to qualify as sustainable under the taxonomy. That said, there are a number of possibilities that we've been able to identify. So, for instance, we consider it most likely that natural gas and or nuclear energy may be included in the taxonomy as so-called transitional activities, subject to a sunset clause, meaning that their inclusion in the taxonomy would be time limited. In relation to natural gas projects in particular, it's been rumored that they may only qualify as taxonomy aligned in cases where they directly substitute for or replace energy production using coal, and also provided certain performance thresholds are satisfied. Now, what we do have to emphasize is that, these are speculations and rumors at this point. It's still highly uncertain at this point, what the Commission will propose in the Complementary Delegated Act. We understand that the drafting is being handled by the cabinet of President von der Leyen directly. Such is the level of political sensitivity. Even other senior commissioners may not be fully apprised of the details of the complementary DA. So it is fair to say that the Commission is keeping its cards very close to its chest when it comes to this piece of legislation. The secrecy of the Commission has become a cause of concern for prominent member states that have insisted on the inclusion of natural gas and nuclear energy in the taxonomy. particularly France. So, what we understand is that the French government is increasingly nervous that conditions attached to the use of nuclear energy in particular will be too stringent to facilitate investment in nuclear at national level. Accordingly, we understand that France is currently attempting to gain leverage over the Complementary Delegated Act by mobilizing opposition among member states to the Climate Delegated Act. And this is where you may have to listen carefully, because I'll be mentioning both the Complementary and Climate Delegated Acts quite frequently. So of course, you may recall from our previous updates that the scrutiny period for the Climate Delegated Act will end on the 7th December. Now, of course, that means that unless member states object to the climate DA by next Tuesday, it will pass into law. And just on a procedural point, a qualified majority in council is needed to block the Climate Delegated Act. And for, excuse me, for a qualified majority to be reached, 55% of member states, which collectively account for 65% of the EU's population, must vote in favor of an objection to the DA. And 55% of member states is approximately 15 out of a total of 27 member states. So again, as mentioned, France is currently trying to gain the support of enough member states to be able to block the climate DA, so as to maintain political leverage over the Commission when it comes to the contents of the complementary DA. Now, for its part, the European Commission is confident that a qualified majority to block the climate DA cannot be reached in Council. And this partly explains why they have decided to publish the complementary DA after the climate DA has passed the last obstacle with the end of the scrutiny period on the 7th of December. So as sort of a general point, many of you may be wondering, why some member states are so adamant that natural gas and nuclear energy be included in the taxonomy. The simple answer is that there is an expectation that the taxonomy will be used to allocate EU funding in future. Accordingly, if nuclear energy and natural gas projects qualify as taxonomy aligned, member states can use EU and public funds at national level to provide financing for such projects. And those of you that follow politics in France will be aware that President Macron has recently committed to expanding France's nuclear energy capacity. And doing so would be easier and potentially eligible for EU funding if nuclear energy is qualified as sustainable under the EU taxonomy. Now, of course, Eurosif has voiced its kind of position or made a contribution to the debate on the topic. And we issued a statement and sent it to relevant policymakers last week, in which we highlighted, from our perspective, some of the risks associated with including natural gas and nuclear energy in the taxonomy. And the main points we highlighted were, the following. First, that qualifying natural gas and nuclear energy as sustainable in the EU could potentially undermine the credibility of the EU sustainable finance agenda. And also, equally important, while we can understand the motivations of member states for wanting to include natural gas and nuclear energy in the taxonomy, excluding them would not prejudice the prerogatives of EU member states. from determining their own energy mix. So, effectively, merely because natural gas and nuclear energy are not in the taxonomy does not mean that, they cannot, projects on natural gas or nuclear energy cannot be publicly funded in member states. Just to foreshadow maybe what we're going to discuss a bit later on, Eurosif also harbors concerns for how the inclusion of natural gas and nuclear energy in the taxonomy may undermine taxonomy-related product disclosures under SFDR. But again, we'll get into more detail on that, in a few moments. But with that, I'd welcome any questions at this point. I do appreciate it can be difficult to follow with all these references to a climate DA or delegated act and a complementary DA or delegated act. It can be difficult to disentangle, but if anyone requires clarifications, please don't be shy. And of course, if nothing comes to mind now, we can answer any questions at the end. All right. Well, it would appear that that has been relatively clear to everyone. So with that, we can move on to our next item on the agenda, which is, of course, the state of play of the SFDR. Well, actually, hold on. Just before, if everyone will allow, we have one question. So, how would France maybe play this when they hold the presidency? Probably in all likelihood, to be honest with you, this question of whether or not and how natural gas and nuclear energy will be included in the taxonomy will probably be determined before the French presidency begins. So there'll be relatively little scope for France or other member states to do all that much once the Complementary Delegated Act has been published and adopted. So, one very important thing to note is that when it comes to delegated acts, the member states and the European Parliament have no right to amend the Commission's proposal. And so effectively, they can either accept it or reject it. And in many instances, member states and the European Parliament are reluctant to totally reject a measure proposed by the Commission, even if they dislike it. When it comes to this issue, it is ultimately goes to the very core of national interest in some cases. And so, from our point of view, we don't quite know how Paris would react if the Commission were to propose something that, was not to their liking. I think it's equally important that I just say, so I don't create the impression that it's only France creating this issue. France is merely the most prominent member state. There is, of course, also several other member states, particularly in Central and Eastern Europe, that are pushing for the inclusion of natural gas. Germany has also been pushing for natural gas, but they have been much less vocal in the last few weeks with the government formation going on. So, France has seemingly been the most active on this point, but it is by no means, the only member state that is concerned by it. But I mean, I hope that answers your question. But otherwise, moving on to SFDR and the state of play. Many of you will probably have seen by now that the application of technical standards that detail the disclosure requirements under the SFDR have been delayed yet again by the European Commission. So the technical standards will now formally apply as of the 1st of January 2023. The Commission has stated that the delay is necessary to allow enough time for them to prepare the delegated act that will consolidate the technical standards into one legal instrument. and for its formal adoption, which of course will involve a few months of scrutiny by the European Parliament and the Council. So again, maybe just to offer a little bit of clarity so that people don't get lost in procedure. Of course, the European supervisory authorities, ESMA, EIOPA, and the EBA have prepared the technical standards, working very much at technical level, and they've proposed them now to the European Commission. It is up to the Commission to draft a delegated act that consolidates the technical standards that the ESAs have submitted, and actually then, formally propose that to the Council and the European Parliament. And it's only then after a scrutiny period of a few months that it will enter into force. And so effectively, the Commission has estimated that it will require, a significant amount of time over the course of 2022 to finalize all of that work. Perhaps probably of most interest to participants on the call, or at our update today, the delay will directly affect a number of disclosure requirements under SFDR, and most notably these include pre-contractual disclosures for Article 8 and Article 9 products, which will include, of course, disclosure of taxonomy alignment at product level. So now with this latest delay, these disclosures will now first apply from the 1st of January 2023. Very importantly, the deferral will not apply to the disclosure of adverse sustainability impacts at entity level, which is stipulated by Article 4 of the SFDR. So in its letter to the European Parliament and the Council announcing the further delay, the Commission clarified that financial market participants will have to publish their adverse sustainability impacts on the 30th June 2023. Now, of course, they will have to use data from a reference period running from 1st January 2022 to 31st December 2022 to calculate those adverse sustainability impacts. So, just to give you a little bit of kind of commentary on Eurosif's view, before maybe then responding to any questions you might have, we do understand the Commission's reasons for this delay, and our impression is that they're largely driven by practical considerations. The Commission simply requires more time to adopt the delegated act that will give the technical standards their actual legal effect. However, based on our assessment, frankly, a further delay will do little to alleviate or rectify any of the implementation challenges that FMPs or financial market participants have encountered while trying to prepare disclosures or prepare compliance. So most obviously, of course, we anticipate that the availability of data will remain a fundamental issue. And, unfortunately, a delay of 6 months will do, little to improve data availability. For that reason, privately, we believe that this 6-month delay won't really do much for the market or for industry. The disclosures, whether they occur from 1st July 2022 or 1st January 2023 will be imperfect. And seemingly supervisors, at European level, at national level, do understand that, disclosures under SFDR will improve over time. It'll be an iterative process. In addition, more on a technical point, legally speaking, some of the application dates in SFDR are stipulated in the level 1 text or in the primary legislation, meaning the Commission, legally cannot arbitrarily defer them without the consent of the European Parliament and the Council. So if you do, want to, be very legalistic. The Commission cannot merely defer the application of certain requirements by a letter. That simply doesn't really suffice. And this is the case, for example, with taxonomy-related product disclosures, related to Article 8 and Article 9 products. The primary text of the SFDR stipulates that they must be made on the 1st of January 2022. Now, practically speaking, we know that supervisors are going to be lenient. They might not, as the expression goes, prioritize supervisory action against FMPs that are failing to adhere to this requirement. But nevertheless, there is this misalignment between, the requirements in the primary legislation and then the application dates that the Commission is delaying or saying now can be delayed. And, for that reason, we would still like to see some legal clarifications from the Commission. Another thing to consider is that this delay has created additional compliance challenges for financial market participants when it comes to consideration of clients' sustainability preferences in the manner prescribed by MiFID II. Those requirements under MiFID II are due to enter into application in August 2022. And basically, in the absence of Article 8 and Article 9 product disclosures, which will now only be available on 1st January 2023, financial advisors and distributors will not be able to assess client sustainability preferences by reference to Article 8 and Article 9 products. And that is mandated by MiFID II. So that has caused maybe inadvertently quite a significant issue later down the line. So with that, I'll actually stop here. I think that's quite a lot of information to take in and to process as it is. Please let us know. There's already a few questions that we'll be happy to take a look at now. But let us know if you have any further questions. And so let's just see what we have in the Q&A function. So yeah, here's a question. Given the postponement of the SFDR level 2 RTS, can we envisage a delay of the application dates of other requirements by the Commission in order to reduce regulatory risks? All I can say is that is effectively, at least I won't say that Eurosif will be seeking further delays, but we will definitely be looking for clarifications. As mentioned, there are, one of the frustrating things about the Commission's letter to the Parliament and the Council in which they announced this delay is that it doesn't really it's not that specific in terms of what disclosure requirements it's actually delaying. And some of them, as mentioned, are stipulated in the primary text of the legislation. So a letter cannot, legally speaking, actually delay them. Technically, the Commission should have to conduct a quick fix whereby it proposes amendments to the level 1, which the European Parliament and the Council would then have to acquiesce to. But there isn't really a political will in the Commission to do that at this point. Our kind of analysis at this point is that effectively financial market participants, if there is a requirement stipulated in the primary text of SFDR, they should try to comply with it, even in the absence of formally adopted technical standards. We're going to seek clarifications, and we think the Commission should provide clarifications, but given how the SFDR process has unfolded, I'll put it this way, I wouldn't be surprised if the clarifications aren't forthcoming, which is a little bit unfortunate. But I can give you, say, an example of one of the misalignments that FMPs now have to contend with. Of course, in this delay, the Commission has said that at entity level, disclosure of adverse sustainability impacts at entity level will have to be made on the 30th of June 2023. There is no mention really of any delay to disclosure of adverse sustainability impacts at product level, which in the text of the primary legislation have to be made by 30th December 2022. So how exactly that is going to work is unclear. And again, we'll be seeking clarifications, and hopefully the Commission will be able to provide them. And then, the other question we have, so you see a delay also on first level application of Article 5 TR. In particular, regulation asks how and to what extent investments are in economic activities. Yes, I mean, we do effectively see that, the application of I mean, what's interesting is the disclosures for Article 8 and Article 9 products. There's no actual kind of application date stipulated in the primary text. And the general Article 8 and Article 9 product disclosures seemingly therefore have been deferred by this delay to the 1st January 2023. The issue with that is, of course, that the taxonomy related product disclosures have to be made on 1st January 2022. So there's a misalignment there. But our estimation of the Commission's intent is that, Article 8, Article 9 product disclosures have been delayed by 12 months. And of course, if you don't have the general disclosures, it's difficult to have specific taxonomy related product disclosures, that are kind of a subcategory of them. But with that, I think we should just move on. So I see we have received another question, but we will revert back to that, at the end if we have time. But of course, it relates to data availability, which is obviously, probably very much on people's minds. So with that, I will actually now pass you over to my colleague, Federica, who will give you a quick update on the progress of the EU Green Bond Standard. So with that, Federica, please go ahead.
Thank you, Hugo, and good afternoon to everybody. I will be very quick to allow you to make your question, and please post them in the Q&A or in the chat boxes. So just a quick reminder, on the 6th of July, the European Commission tabled a proposed regulation for establishing a EU Green Bond standard. We spoke about this in the update of July. What is the EU Green Bond standard is a set of common criteria for EU and non-EU issuers of green bonds willing to label those bonds as EU green bonds. That's why we speak about voluntary application of the label. Just to recap the main characteristics before we deep dive into the developments in the Council and in the Parliament. The proceeds of EU green bonds must be allocated fully to projects related to taxonomy-aligned activities. The fact sheets and the allocation reports of the EU Green Bond standards must be subject to external review by qualified and independent reviewers. And those external reviewers are registered and supervised by ESMA, which is the European Security and Markets Authority. So in autumn, and especially in the past few weeks between October and November, debates kicked off in the EU Council, which represents member states, and the EU Parliament. And both of them, as we know, share the legislative power with the EU Commission. So the legislative proposal is now discussed within those bodies and between those bodies. So what's happening in the EU Council? On the 23rd of November, member states discussed a first compromise text. According to our understanding of the state of discussion, one of the main issues that member states are discussing is the taxonomy alignment of the use of proceeds, which might be controversial for sovereign issuers. So the regulation proposed by the EU Commission, as mentioned, requires full taxonomy alignment, which means that 100% of the proceeds must be allocated in activities that are taxonomy aligned or that will be taxonomy aligned within 5 years or up to 10 years if necessary and duly explained. So the Council now is proposing a so-called flexibility pocket of 20%, meaning that up to 20% of the proceeds can be allocated to non-taxonomy aligned activities, so activities that do not meet the technical screening criteria for substantial contribution. And according to the proposal that we've seen, this provision would apply to all issuers, sovereign and corporates. And this is to ensure a level playing field between all the issuers of EU green bonds. And this flexibility pocket would come with strings attached, let's say. So activities for which technical screening criteria for substantial contributions have not been developed yet, or activities that are particularly innovative or complex and that are not included in the taxonomy or not included in the taxonomy yet. And this particularly refers to strategic investments that states can often do to promote the green transition. That's the reason for this, this amendment. And also the EU Council proposed the EU Commission publish a delegated act to further detailing those criteria for this 20% flexibility pocket. So the proposal, as we know, has generated disagreement between member states that are divided because some countries underline the importance to keep a balance between the environmental top quality and the usability of the instruments. So according to their views, it is necessary to grant a flexible regime to promote the uptake of the standards, especially among sovereign issuers, and the scale up of the market. On the other hand, other countries object the flexibility option, and they underline that it is necessary to protect the credibility of the standards to ensure its uptake. So discussions are ongoing, and it would be not for sure an easy dossier, this one. The EU Council is also debating, and discussions are still ongoing between member states regarding the role of the external reviewers, which are crucial in the whole proposal, and the interplay between national competent authorities and supervision power to ESMA, especially with regard to sovereign issuers. Finally, the Council has proposed that the application date is 18 months after the entry into force of the regulation, just to allow the market to align. As for the debate in the Parliament, there were exchanges of views and discussion within the ECON, which is the Committee on Economic Monetary Affairs Committee, and the ENVI, which is the Committee of the Environmental, Public Health and Food Safety. And debate has started, so in the Parliament, according to our sources and understanding, among MEPs, so member of the European Parliament's objection were raised on the flexibility regime because that would undermine the credibility of the standard. Other highlights, other MEPs raised concern about the possible introduction, and here again we find them, natural gas and nuclear power in the EU taxonomy. Some voices argue the importance to make sure that the EU Green Bond standard proceeds are not allocated to those activities, even if they are in the taxonomy. Some MEPs propose to make the EU Green Bond standard mandatory, either for EU institutions and or for all EU issuers. And there are other points concerned regarding the transparency of the documents. So I will just keep very briefly on the latest important development. On the 5th of November, the European Central Bank released its opinion on the legislative proposal. So the observation and the comments refers to the original proposal by the EU Commission. And here in the slide, you will find some highlights of the document that is available online, so you can consult it in more details. But anyway, the ECB invites the European Commission to evaluate the opportunity to make the EU Green Bond standard mandatory, and this topic should be assessed according to the ECB by the end of December 2023. The European Central Bank fully supports the full taxonomy alignment of the bonds, of the use of proceeds of the bonds, irrespective of the nature of the issuer, so both corporates and sovereign issuers. And it raised some concerns regarding the point that the taxonomy alignment, as it is stated in the proposal, can be reached within 5 to 10 years. Because the European Central Bank thinks that there are risks that the sanction regime that is established now in the proposed regulation would not be sufficient to address the situation where an issuer does not comply with the taxonomy alignment planned up to 5 or 10 years as expected. Another important point is that the European Central Bank suggests the information disclosed in the fact sheet and the reports could be included in the European Single Access Data Point in machine readable format. And finally, the Central Bank asked the regulators to clarify that EU green bond issuers located outside the European Union should be subject to a national competent authority in the text. If not, so if green bond issuers located outside Europe are not subject to national competent authorities, they would be able to send EU green bonds and sell them in the EU green bond markets without being subject to the sanction regime that is envisaged for European issuers. There are other views, other amendments proposed, but I will leave the floor to the comments, to your comments, and especially to my colleague Selina, that is supposed to present the latest part of this presentation today. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you, Federica, and good afternoon to everyone. Just very briefly now, I'm aware we only have a few minutes left on the EU's Capital Markets Union package. Last week, the European Commission published a set of 4 legislative proposals, delivering on its commitments under the 2020 Capital Markets Union Action Plan. And this package of proposals overall aims to improve the ability of companies to raise capital across the EU, and of course also tries to achieve better access to data, ensure trade transparency, etc. And as an underlying aim, again, the EU aims to make the financial sector more competitive or ensure its competitiveness, and also make sure that it drives the green and digital transitions. So more precisely, the package includes 4 proposals. We have the establishment of a European Single Access Point, or ASAP. We have a review of the European Long-Term Investment Funds Regulation, or ALTIF. We have a review of the Alternative Investment Fund Managers Directive, and in parts also adjusting the undertakings for the Collective Investment and Transferable Securities Directive, or UCITS. And last but not least, the review of the Markets and Financial Instruments Regulation. So again, I'm just going to focus now on the ASAP and the ALTIF, because these are, from a sustainable finance perspective, the 2 most relevant proposals, so to say. With the ASAP proposals, that the Commission seeks to establish an EU-wide single access point for public financial and sustainability-related information on EU companies and EU investment products. So Commission is trying to create a kind of common data space where everyone can easily access the data, and this has the aim to ensure a greater visibility of companies vis-a-vis investors, and also facilitate easier access to the information for investors. So maybe there as a note, the ESAP is actually primarily directed to users such as investors, financial analysts, asset managers, etc., and could actually make it easier for financial institutions to access financial but also ESG data, and maybe lessen the need to rely on third-party data providers. So which data will be included under the ESAP? It sets out that it has set out in its annex a list of existing EU legislation which is covered, and this also includes disclosures under SFDR and the EU Taxonomy, which will be made available through ESAP. But it also includes the provision that further future legislation may include a provision to disclose data under ESAP, so we can expect the CSRD disclosures also to be included under ESAP. Now, maybe in the very last minutes, a focus on the LTIF regulation. Here, the review has the aim to make the LTIFs or investments in LTIFs more attractive, to increase their uptake, to make it easier for investors to invest in LTIFs. And that, again, from a sustainability perspective, is also quite favorable because, as you know, LTIFs are designed to channel long-term investments, and these are obviously needed to help finance the green but also digital transitions. And in more concrete terms, the proposal includes, amongst others, provisions that aim to broaden the scope of eligible assets for LTIFs. So the minimum investment threshold of 10 million euros has been removed. It is now only at 1 million euros. There are also the limitations on borrowing have been reduced from now it's 50% that LTIFs can actually borrow, and before it was only 30%. And also the rules on marketing have been eased. So LTIF managers do no longer need to put in place certain facilities, and also the duplicative requirement with respect to suitability assessment has been removed. So now it's only MiFID II requirements that are applicable. And then on the final slide, you'll again see it. You can download it from our website. Just a brief summary on the Alternative Investment Funds Directive and the review of the MiFIR market. You see again, in both cases, the overall aim is to enhance efficiency and transparency. And with that, I'll leave it and hand it back over to Hugo.
Thanks, Selena, and thanks, Federica, for those updates. And I am conscious we're at 45 minutes past the hour, so technically we should finish up, and many of you probably have to run on to other calls or have other commitments. That said, there was quite a few questions that we received in the chat as well, just in relation to SFDR. So, maybe we can try and clarify a few of them, because I do understand, this is a huge headache for people, as it is for us, just trying to wrap our head around what this delay will actually imply. The first one is we received a question, earlier on whether the Commission plans to synchronize SFDR RTS disclosures and data availability of investee companies through CSRD, or the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. The simple answer to that question is yes, absolutely they do. It is, of course, quite clearly stipulated in the proposal for CSRD that it should take account of SFDR and should ensure that there is alignment, or that the disclosure requirements are synced. Now, of course, that is the simple answer, and that is theoretically the case. But sometimes, the political process in Brussels can not always lead to the desired outcome of the European Commission. And there's a few complications that we envisage moving forward when it comes to alignment between SFDR disclosures and CSRD. So just quickly to clarify, some of you may recall from the renewed sustainable finance strategy that was published in over the summer, that the Commission has committed to reviewing some of the principal adverse impact indicators. Now, of course, what's most obvious to me is financial market participants probably are most interested when it comes to CSRD in ensuring that non-financial companies have to, provide information that they need to calculate principal adverse impacts. The issue is that at present, the CSRD process is ongoing. The file is currently being negotiated in the European Parliament and in the Council separately, and they will ultimately then start negotiating between each other on how the Commission's original proposal will be amended. While that process is ongoing, the PAI indicators in SFDR might undergo a review, and there might be a proposal to revise them. So it's not an issue that's materialized just yet. It's just something maybe on the horizon that we're cognizant of, that if you have two moving targets or two objects flying through the air at the same time, it can be harder to make sure that they're going to cross paths in the way you want them to, if you'll forgive that expression. But, the simple answer, like I said, is yes, the Commission would like there to be synchronized disclosures. Really, there is an awareness that financial market participants subject to SFDR will depend to a great extent on the disclosures mandated by CSRD. But let's just cross our fingers and hope that that's how things turn out. Of course, Eurosif will be quite proactive, so we're not just going to leave it to fate. But yeah, I mean, that is all the reassurance I can give you at this point. Otherwise, just sort of finally, we've received a few more questions on SFDR, so I'll take only just one of those given the time. So let's just see. Yeah. So, okay, we have a question here to better understand what is delayed to 1st January 2023 and what is not. So supervisors will start at a later date to check if the documents comply with the regulation. But PAI reporting will still have to be started for Q1 2022 to Q4 2022, which will be compiled in a PAI report in June 2023. So yes, I mean, if I could maybe slightly kind of suggest a different, wording to that. When it comes to gathering data and calculating adverse sustainability impacts, financial market participants will have to start doing that from 1st January 2022. But they will only really have to disclose sort of the outcome of their calculations of adverse sustainability impacts 30th June 2023 at entity level. At product level, it's stipulated in the primary text of SFDR that it should be by 30th December 2022. We require clarification from the Commission whether that remains the case, because our understanding was, to a certain extent, if you look at the original application sort of schedule for SFDR, we thought that product level disclosures of adverse sustainability impacts would follow entity level disclosure of adverse sustainability impacts. So now that order seems to have been reversed. We're not entirely sure if the Commission is cognizant of that, and will require some clarifications. Because of course, another potential source of confusion is, the Article 8 and Article 9 disclosures do not necessarily, occur at the same time as disclosure of adverse sustainability impacts at product level. And seemingly it is Article 8 and Article 9 disclosures that have been delayed by this deferral of 12 months. And that touches on, your follow-up question, which is, when it comes to reporting taxonomy alignment or disclosing taxonomy alignment of Article 8 and Article 9 products, when is it that should occur? Well, the primary text of SFDR says it should occur as of 1st January 2022. And for those of you that are interested, you won't actually find in, if you search for the SFDR legal text online, you won't find that application date anywhere. The reason it's difficult to find is because that application date was inserted into SFDR through an amendment in the taxonomy regulation, which is Article 25 of the taxonomy regulation. So that's where you'll find it. So what's unclear now to us is how can you defer general Article 8 and Article 9 product disclosures to 1st January 2023 when there is this requirement to report on the taxonomy alignment of Article 8 and Article 9 products by 1st January 2022. We can sort of anticipate that what the Commission will say when asked for clarifications is that, you know, financial market participants should attempt to apply the regulation in principle. What that means is never clear, but you know, that unfortunately is all the clarity we can offer at this point. But again, you know, the deferral only really became public at the start of this week. We've already reached out to the Commission looking for clarifications. So we will be obviously sharing information with the national SIFs once it becomes available. And that should then be available to those of you on the call or on the webinar today. But on that note, I think we've run over a little bit, you know, by about 10 minutes. So I apologize for that. And, you know, as always, you know, thank you for taking the time today. I know it's a very busy period. Hopefully this has offered a little bit of clarity, context, given you some valuable insight. This, of course, will be our last sustainable finance update of 2021. So the next time we speak to you will be in the new year. So with that, I'll wish everyone, you know, a happy Christmas and happy New Year. Probably the earliest Christmas wishes you've received, but that shows you where my mind is. So yeah, I mean, thank you all, and have a good rest of the day and a good rest of the week. So ciao.
Bye.
Bye bye.